Okay, so here we are in Microsoft Flight Simulator at the default Liverpool John Lennon Airport. That's Echo Golf Papa in the UK. This is one of the souped up airports in the UK upgrade, so it's one of the pretty ones. And the reason that I'm here is because it's got a nice long runway and we're taking off in a twin. And we're looking at the shiny new Carenado. This was released today, Carenado PA34 Seneca 5. The Seneca was originally produced in 1967, and it's gone in and out of production over the years, but it's still made today, and this is the current version that Piper make. It's the Seneca 5, although this, as depicted in the simulator, is one of the early versions of the Seneca 5. So when you look inside it, it doesn't have the full glass cockpit that the most recent Seneca 5s have. If you look at a brand new Piper Seneca PA34 Seneca 5, it has 3 big glass PFDs on it, whereas this has got traditional gauges, but it's got some glass in it. It's got the Garmin GPSs and stuff like that. So it's a nice sort of hybrid, bit of glass, bit of traditional cockpit stuff. And as you can see, it's very, very pretty on the inside, as you'd expect from Carenado, and very, very pretty on the outside as well. And I switch to the drone camera view. There's a real close-up of the intake on one of the engines, and a look at the screws and all this sort of thing. So the texturing really stands up to very, very close inspection indeed, and it's very, very lovely. Inside there are a lot of features that you don't necessarily need on an add-on aeroplane, but it's kind of fun to have them, and I'll just point some of those out to you. So for example, you can operate the cabin lights, turn them on and off. You can pull the tray tables out. You can, if I can do it, there you can draw the blinds in the cockpit and stuff like that. You can operate the doors and things like that. So if you like pretending to be a passenger, then a bit of fun stuff. And as far as the cockpit door is concerned, you can operate that as well. Now, in common with most Carenado stuff these days, if you click on the yoke, you get this thing coming up, which if I zoom in on a little bit so you can see it's a little iPad where you can turn on and off static elements on the exterior, and you can decide whether you want pilot showing or not showing and what have you, and operate the doors and stuff like that. So if I do that, and then we go on the external view, you've got all these funky bits and pieces like remove before flight tags and chocks, and the baggage compartments are open, and it's got a ground power unit attached to it and all that kind of stuff. So you don't need it, but it's kind of fun to have it. So if we go back in the cockpit, what I can do is I can get rid of that stuff, and hopefully all of that will disappear, and then we go back on the external view, and we've got that. And you'll notice that there is no pilot visible at the moment, but what I can of course do is I can decide that I want to show a pilot, and sure enough I get one, and that is purely a visual thing. It's independent of whether you choose to do this. You'll notice that I've got the weight of a passenger in the front seat, but I'm not visually showing a passenger in the front seat, so you've got to be a little bit careful about that, in that you could be loading in the visuals of a pilot and thinking you've got the weight of that on board when in fact you haven't, or perhaps more critically, you could have the weight when you think you've not got someone in the front passenger seat and stuff like that. And with something like that, that's kind of important, because the PA34 is a 6-seater, so if you've got it showing in the sim that it's got 6 people on board, and you're wondering why it's taking a long time to take off when visually it doesn't look like there's 6 people on it, then there's your answer. Anyway, back in the cockpit, the other thing that we've got on this iPad, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this sort of thing, but it's got preset states on there, cold and dark, ready for taxi or ready for takeoff and what have you. And if you want to get rid of that, you can do that, and you can get rid of the yoke or show the yoke, and you can do the same thing on the other side, which is sort of convenient to get to those switches, because the yoke can be a little bit in the way. The PA34 is certified to fly into known icing conditions, so it has, when we look on the external view, it has de-icing boots on the wings, de-icing boots on the tail, and on the vertical stabilizer. So this, if you're looking for an excuse to buy this thing, it's good for flying in icing conditions. The other thing, of course, it's got for icing conditions is it's got this thing on the windscreen. If you've ever seen that on planes and you're not quite sure what it is, there's a bit of a clue. There's an electrical lead running to that, and what that is that's a heated glass panel, so that if the windscreen ices up when you're in the cockpit, this bit will be clear, so you can look through it when you're coming in for a landing. Another thing that this does is, obviously, it's got a DV panel, direct vision panel, that you can open up, and unlike some aeroplanes in Microsoft Flight Simulator, when you open this in flight, it does not cause a crash, so you can actually use it. There are a lot of very, very nice visual touches. For example, you can see the static wicks on the wing there, and these blow about in the wind as you're flying along, so the static wicks on the tail and on the wing and stuff like that, we'll see it when we're flying, but those things move around in the wind. So visually this thing is absolutely stunning, as you'd expect from Carenado, but does it stun you when it comes to flying it? Well, let's find out. Now, it's a little bit of a gotcha on this thing, and that is that you can turn on all the switches here, but you might be wondering where the sort of fuel tanks are to turn them on, and they are down there, and they're a little bit obscured by that that fastener for the seatbelt. So if you move the view over and come back here, and then move the view back a little bit, don't let that catch you out, because you're not going to be able to start the engines without selecting the fuel tanks on the thing. So if you're trying to start it, it won't start, it'll only start on Control E, then that will be the reason you haven't got the fuel turned on. So let's get the thing cranked up, because it has got very nice engine sounds. Some people said that they don't like the engine sounds. I think they're kind of nice on this. So what we'll do is we'll get the mixture levers forward like that, and we've got the prop levers forward, and then on early Senecas there were a lot of switches up here. They kind of cleaned it up a little bit and moved some of them down here, but the arrangement of the switches is a little bit, esoteric, shall we say. You get used to it, but there you go. So since we are going to start it up, we'll turn on the strobe lights and the nav lights, and we might as well have all the lights on so that you can see them. And then of course what we'd need is the battery on like that, and what we will do is we'll start the left engine first. So what we'll do is we'll put both magnetos on for the left engine, and we'll turn on the left fuel pump like that, and I'll swing the view round there so that you can see the engine fire, and hopefully this thing will crank up. So let's give it a go. Now what I have got is I've got the engine sounds turned down, because I'm doing a review and you don't want to be trying to hear me over the noise of the engine sounds. But what I will do is I'll very briefly turn the engine sounds up in the simulator so that you can have a listen to what the engine sounds like. So aircraft engines, we'll crank that up a little bit. I'll hit apply and save, and we'll go back and we'll resume. Now when you're in the cockpit, it simulates you wearing a headset, so the sounds are kind of muted a little bit, but when you go on the outside you get that, and so it's got quite nice sounds. And when you've got both engines running and you do that, they do sort of resonate a little bit with one another, so it sounds very nice when you're on the outside. Now what I will do is, just to kind of demonstrate that, is I'll get the other engine going. So it will probably be a good idea to get the alternator on so we don't flatten the battery. So that's the left alternator on, and then we want the right magnetos on, and we want the right fuel pump on. We keep the alternator off when we're starting, and then what we'll do is we'll crank the other engine, and that thing gets going. So now we'll put the right alternator on, and we can get rid of the fuel pumps because we don't need them. But if I go on the external view now and rev the thing up, quite nice sounds. And from the inside, the sound is a little bit muted from simulating you wearing a headset. Now obviously you don't want to be trying to hear me talk over those engine noises, so what I'll do is I'll come back in here and we'll take the engine noise down. But just be aware that you have heard what the engines sound like, and some people have said that they don't like them, but I think they're pretty good. So we'll hit resume, and we're back in the cockpit. Now, of course, what we can do is, because we've got the alternator on, we can start cranking up the avionics. So the avionics on this thing are, most of them are turned on by that, but there are some individual switches for them. For example, that for the transponder, and this for the storm scope. Now you can see that that is showing weather, and it's not showing a lot of weather because at the moment we've got rather pleasant weather outside, but I can assure you that if there were thunderclouds over there, it would be showing them red on this thing. So this thing does work. Not everything works on it, but it's a pretty good indication of that, because the PA34 Seneca is certified for flying into known icing conditions. So there are a lot of things for when you go into icing conditions. You've got this thing, the airframe surface stuff, that's all the de-icing boots on the leading edges of all the control surfaces, and then we've got prop heat on there, and we've got windshield heat, and the windshield heat heats up this frame here, so that bit's clear of ice and stuff like that. So this thing is pretty good for bad weather flying, and you can get one of these things up to about 23,000 feet, so you can get over a lot of weather. And another nice thing about the Seneca is that it has counter-rotating propellers. You may just possibly be able to see that, but what it is both propellers sort of rotate inwards toward the center. Now what that means is that if you lose an engine on this thing, obviously that's kind of important to be able to control the thing properly, and let's say I lose the left engine. Normally what I would do is I would be careful not to turn towards the dead engine, because what that can do is that can put in on a lot of asymmetric thrust, because all your power's on this side, and you can end up putting the thing into a spin. And this thing is a little bit less prone to that because of those counter-rotating propellers. If you abuse it, you can still put it into a spin, but it's a little bit less likely to do it than some other aeroplanes and what have you. So it's a little bit safer for single engine operation than most other aeroplanes in this class. The other nice thing about that is that on one engine, this thing can maintain over 16,000 feet. So if you lose an engine and you're in mountainous terrain, you're in with a pretty good chance of getting over mountains if they're not taller than 16,000 feet. So if you're looking for something that you want to fly around the world in, and you're looking for an excuse to buy this thing, then there's a reason for it. It's good with an engine out. And obviously, you know, when you've got engine failures on in your simulator and all that kind of stuff, that's pretty cool. As far as the avionics are concerned, you got a traditional 6-pack there, but you got a few electronic bits and pieces. Like you got an electronic chronometer there, and then you got this thing for if you where your waypoints are and stuff like that. If you've got a flight plan in, which I have at the moment, I've got Liverpool to Charles de Gaulle in France, and then you've got this thing here where you can check a lot of stuff. So I can check my fuel on there and see how much fuel I've got in the left and right tanks, and I can come here and so I can see the battery's charging because I turned the alternator on, and you know, the voltages and all that kind of stuff. So all that kind of fun stuff, you know, for what engine RPMs I'm at and all this sort of thing. And then you've got all these engine gauges here as well, and then last but not least, you've got landing gear lever there, you've got flaps lever there, which is a little bit tricky to see, and then you've got alternate air vents there. There are a few other switches there for sort of vents and stuff like that, and then down here you've got the flight director autopilot thing. You got the yaw damper on there. You got all that stuff for the sort of anti-icing and de-icing and all that kind of stuff, and that's about the size of it. None of these fuses work, by the way, but that's not particularly unusual for add-ons like this. So despite the fact that it's a fairly capable aeroplane, it's not particularly complex in terms of avionics. And of course the other nice thing about this is that since it's got these the sort of Garmin GNS 530s and the the 430 and what have you, you can swap that out for sort of modded ones and stuff like that if you want a little bit more capability on it. And then if you want to go old school, it's got the old automatic direction finder on there that all works and what have you. It's got a transponder, so you can use it on VATSIM if you want to, you know what I mean, like that. It's got this sort of storm scope thing for weather and what have you, and then this is the autopilot thing on there. That's all the kind of ADF stuff for audio and what have you. So quite nice. Not a massively confusing cockpit layout, but kind of a nice one. Personally, I think the default view for the cockpit could do with being a little bit higher, but obviously it's very easy to shunt that up. So let's get this thing in the air, because it's got a couple of other nice tricks up its sleeve that might convince you that you want this thing. Anyway, what we'll do is we'll get the parking brake off, and you'll notice that this thing immediately starts rolling, even on idle. So you might want to be a little bit careful about that. It's got a fair old bit of thrust. It's got some kind of interesting rattly noises going on when you taxi the thing about, but it really doesn't take a lot of throttle to get this thing rolling, and once it is rolling, you do have to be kind of applying the brakes, because you can see that I've got hardly any throttle on there, and this thing's rolling quite fast. Now, I'm not going to worry about getting ATC clearance to go on the runway, because it's my sim, so it's my airport, and I've decided I've got clearance. But obviously, if you were doing sort of like proper simulating and what have you, you might want to get ATC clearance and have a look to make sure that there was nothing coming in for a landing and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to worry about it too much on this occasion. We'll just get ourselves lined up for the runway. Now, theoretically, because it has those counter-rotating propellers, it should track fairly straight down the runway. But in practice, because the takeoff stuff in Microsoft Flight Simulator is a bit iffy with runway handling, you do have to give it a little bit of rudder to get it to track straight down the runway. Not too much. Anyway, I'm going to give it a little bit of flaps for this takeoff. Not that we really need it, because we've got a big long runway in front of us, and we'll just make sure that everything's right. I've got all the lights on and stuff like that. Oh, on the subject of the lights, if we look on the external view, as we've seen, you can have lots of different options with it. You can have nav lights on and strobe light flashing on the tail or flashing on the wings and stuff like that. So we can play around with this stuff if we want to, and have things in lots of different ways if we like. And the lights on this are pretty nice. Sometimes on Flight Simulator planes the lights can be a little bit dim, but you can see the green of the nav lights pretty well lit up there. I've got flashing strobes on the wing. I could switch that to have a flashing strobe on the tail fin if I wanted to, so the lights on it are nice as well. Anyway, let's get this thing in the air. So I'll just make sure that my view's okay. Oh, sun visors work on it if you want to use them. So release the parking brake. And off we go down the runway. Up you come. There we go. I think I've got a bit of down elevator trim on here, so I'm furiously hitting the up elevator trim there. We'll get the gear up. It seems to be sort of trimmed fairly level now. Maybe give it a little bit more trim. And as you can see now, if I can zoom in a little bit, you can see the sort of static wicks waving about in the wind there. So lots of nice little graphical touches on it. If we have a look from the cockpit view, you might be able to see that a little bit better. If you look where the aileron is, you can see the static wick waving about in the wind, and the one on the wingtip, you might just about be able to make out that those are sort of blowing around in the wind. So graphically, it's good old Carenado, very impressive, and looks great. And the paint jobs that you get with this are all really, really lovely. I particularly like this one with its sort of bronzish green. I think that looks really, really well. And sound wise, I think it's okay, and it looks alright. Now, the interesting thing about this, with it being a twin, is the behaviour when you lose an engine, because it's got some nice touches. You know, sometimes people say, oh, you know, Carenado stuff, it's all show and no go. And the Seneca has some interesting characteristics with regard to handling. Of course, it's got those counter-rotating propellers, which mean that it handles a little bit better with an engine out. But the Seneca has washout on the tips of the wing, which means that the inner wing stalls before the outer wing, which means that if you get a little bit of wing drop when you stall, the ailerons are still effective. So you can still use the ailerons to pick up a wing if you stall, if you get a little bit of wing drop, which is kind of nice, because it's sort of kind of an automatic reaction to try and pick a wing up with the ailerons, which you shouldn't really do if you're stalling, you know, because it can help to sort of accentuate a spin or what have you. But you can use the ailerons. Now, probably not a bad idea for me to get the flaps up, and we'll trim it up a little bit, because I want to show you something interesting with this. As I say, you know, sometimes Carenado get accused of being all show and no go, but they have done something very nice with this thing, and allow me to demonstrate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chop one of the engines so it conks out. Yeah, so I'm going to get the prop right back on one of the engines. I'll get the throttle up on both of them. And then what I'm going to do, so I'm going to chop the left engine. So I'm going to pull the mixture right back on the left engine so it stops. So we've got the prop right back, and we've got the mixture right back. And you can see the left engine is slowing down and coming to a halt. And there you go, feathered prop, but not a canned turn off the animation of the propeller moving. You can see that the propeller is still sort of windmilling and moving a little bit. Which is very, very nice. And that is not just a canned animation, because if I do this, since I've still got the throttle forward and I've got airflow on the propeller, if I push that forward, the propeller starts windmilling, and if I bring the mixture in, you can see the gauges are picking up, and we've done an air start with the engine, which is, you know, there aren't that many flight simulator planes that you can do a proper air start with off the airflow, but with this you can. That's kind of nice, isn't it? So, you know, people that say, oh, Carenado stuff, it's not got, you know, very realistic things on it, this one kind of does have. And let's just do this. There you go. You can open the DV panel without having the thing crash, which is kind of nice, isn't it? And it flies very nicely. So, obviously, you know, because I'm chopping the throttle, I'm getting the oh, you've not got the landing gear down. One thing I haven't actually checked, which I'm going to check in a moment, so you're going to be learning this one with me. Seneca actually has 2 stall warning vanes on the wing. One is for when the flaps are down, one is for when the flaps are up. So theoretically, if you change the sort of configuration, you might kill the stall warning and things like that on the thing. But just to sort of demonstrate that, let's get the nose up. And we'll there's a stall warning. And there you go. It will drop a wing, but you can still use the ailerons to pick it up if you want to. Now, if I'd have let that develop, it would have gone into a spin, because this thing will spin. And so, yes, it does have those counter-rotating propellers, but you can't, completely rely on it and just abuse it all the time, because it will spin. If you give it enough rope, it will hang itself. So we'll just go on the external view here, and I'll just should be sort of coming over the Mersey here and coming round. Yeah, we're looking pretty good for a landing. So let's take a look at the airspeed. I'll just get the nose up a little bit, lose a little bit of speed, and we'll give it some flaps, and we'll might as well pop the gear as well. And we'll have a go at landing it. You can see there that it's pitching down with the flaps. Now, this Seneca is not noted for being the easiest plane to land. Not terrible, but there are a lot of other twins in the same class that are a little bit easier to land than the Seneca. And there are various sort of techniques that people espouse with it. Some people go, oh, give it a burst of power just before you touch down, and other people go, no, just keep the speed on and what have you. So, you'll get arguments from people about the best way to go about that. But we'll just see how it goes, shall we? I've got quite a lot of fuel on board, so I'm going to keep the speed up for this. Because we've got plenty of runway. Because they operate 737s and A320s from this airport, so I can definitely get this thing down. Interestingly, the Seneca is occasionally used to train airline pilots. Lufthansa used to use it for training pilots. Come on, baby, you can do it. Yeah, I don't know what the fuss was all about. That seemed pretty easy to land, didn't it? There we go. So we'll get the flaps open to taxi the thing in. There you go. So it looks pretty well, doesn't it? Stamp on the brakes and see if we can get off here. Maybe a little bit faster. We'll go over the grass, shall we? I don't care. Let's just bomb it over the grass. I don't think I'd do that in the real thing. Not least of which because I'd be picking grass out of the undercarriage. But in the sim, of course, you don't have to worry about that too much. There we go. Right, parking brake on, and then we'll chop the engines. And you can see there the sort of counter-rotating propellers on the thing. If you were wondering what I was on about, you know, they both rotate in opposite directions. So, very nice. And yeah, I think, you know, perhaps the best Carenado Microsoft Flight Simulator plane yet. It's got some very nice touches to it, some nice sort of animations on it and things like that. It looks great. And the handling is fairly faithful to the real thing in most respects, as far as I can tell. And it's a good sort of exploring plane because, you know, the ability to fly on one engine at over 16,000 feet and the much nicer handling and slightly safer handling with one engine out and all that kind of stuff. Got a good sort of usable set of avionics, which you could swap out for modded versions if you wanted to, I suppose. Although bear in mind that Carenado tend to lock their config files, so I don't know how easy it would be to do that. But you know, I suppose it's a possibility. I think this would be you know, a good plane in air hauler, with it being a 6-seater, so obviously it's got a bit of lifting capability. I mean, the lifting capability on the Seneca 5 is not as good as the earlier Senecas because they added a lot of funky stuff to it, but handling wise, it's a very good plane, and it's used by a lot of charter companies in real life and for training airline pilots and stuff like that. So it's a fairly serious aeroplane, and it's got quite a wide cabin as well, so it's one of the more comfortable sort of GA twins, and it is undeniably a pretty thing as well. So it's 25 quid, and it's kind of nice. And as I say, if you ask me which is the best Carenado Microsoft Flight Simulator plane, up until recently, it probably would have been their Mooney M20 Ovation. But this, I think, gives it a run for its money. I think this is probably the best Carenado Microsoft Flight Simulator plane. So 25 quid available from the built-in market on the simulator, and yeah, I have to say that, you know, I do recommend it. I think it's very nice, and you can make your own decision on that based on what you've seen me doing there. But sound-wise, it's good. Looks-wise, it's good. It's got some nice animations on it. Fairly faithful to the real thing. Pretty usable in the sim. What else do you want for 25 quid? Can't go wrong, really. Anyway, that's it for this review. Look out for another one soon from my channel, and if you're not subscribed, click on that subscribe button because I appreciate it, and you know, put your comments in the chat and go, I completely disagree with you, Al, you're an idiot, or whatever, you know what I mean, or nice one, and all this sort of thing, because I always like to chat to people, and you know, look out for me on places like AvSim and, you know, flightsim.com and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's it for now. Have a lovely weekend, and if you end up buying this thing, you probably will have a lovely weekend, because as I say, I think it's great. Anyway, that's it for now. Bye.